Right, so Keir Starmer's lied again, folks. Lied his weaselly black guts out. I'm sure you'll be shocked to hear. Not. And even less will you be shocked when I tell you it comes to the matter of Israel once more. You see, it was less than a week ago that David Lammy stood up in the Commons and announced several apparent measures against Israel in light of their intolerable war crimes in Gaza, which amounted to suspending a trade deal and imposing sanctions on 3 settlers. There was no sanctioning of government figures, no real action taken. And as it turns out, the whole trade deal suspension thing might have just been exposed as a complete and utter sham now too, as the UK's trade envoy to Israel has, surprise, surprise, popped up in Israel talking all about trade because, well, it is literally his job. The suspended trade deal might still be suspended. Who would honestly be shocked if it wasn't? But trade with Israel as a whole, in other ways, clearly is still ongoing. It raises the question of whether or not Parliament has been misled by Lammy and Starmer on this issue. But it is also somewhat ironic that arguably one of the few people who could be described as even more pro-Israel than Keir Starmer, that trade envoy we're speaking about here, Ian Austin, is the guy who exposed it. A former Labour MP who took a peerage from Boris Johnson in exchange for attacking his own former party, who also happens to be the one to have exposed all of this. Do Labour really think we are stupid as to not notice?
Member of Parliament and UK Trade Envoy to Israel, Ian Austin.
But let's put it this way, right? The organisers say there are 100,000 people on these protests. If there's only, let's be generous, right? Let's be generous. If only 1 in 10 are racist or support terrorism, that's still 10,000 people.
Yeah.
Right. That is still more than twice as many as the fascists who marched with Mosley at Cable Street in the 30s.
But they did get to Guernsey, and all 9 Jews who were in Guernsey were deported to Auschwitz.
The reason, Professor Rosen, that they didn't invade Britain is because Britain fought back on its own and brought freedom, and fought for not just our freedom, but for freedom.
But we didn't do that on our own, and it's wrong to tell the history that way. We were allied with 2 world powers, America and the Soviet Union.
I think we're straying well off the point here, so we'll...
Okay, but it is I'm sorry, Chair, it's absolute nonsense to claim there's some similarity because of individual examples of anti-Semitism by individual people in Britain. Let's
stop. I'm drawing a line under this line of...
I would kick out John McDonnell. I would kick out all of those people. All of that. I mean, I really would, because I think that, you know, a long history of supporting extremism, all of that, and, you know, I think they've got to deal with that as well. I really do.
John McDonnell, do you want to come back?
It's difficult to deal with the sort of unreality of it. Ian has had a long and obsessional hatred of Jeremy Corbyn on a whole range of issues. I think he's just, it's produced an instability in him. And as a result of this is the sort of behaviour that we get. He's been made a lord, you know, a full-time job for life, by Boris Johnson for attacking Labour. That's why he was given the lordship.
Right, so that was a little montage I'd put together there of Ian Austin. If you weren't aware of who the guy is, you might now be wishing you still didn't know who he was. He's possibly one of the nastiest pieces of work to have ever become an MP. He is defiantly pro-Israel, having been adopted into and raised in a Jewish household, though he is not himself Jewish, but is avowedly Zionist. You could compare and contrast that with Green leader hopeful Zach Polanski, who is Jewish and was raised in a Zionist household, yet is himself anything but. Austin is so pro-Israel, he's spoken at AIPAC conference in the US, as you saw a clip of there. He's labelled 1 in 10 of everyone at a pro-Gaza demonstration as probably racist, so he could then say there were twice as many fascists there, basically, as followed Oswald Mosley to Cable Street. And you saw him goy-splaining to Jewish author, poet and academic Michael Rosen with a large slice of historical revisionism. And lastly, you saw him get put in his place as someone with an instability over his hatred of Jeremy Corbyn by John McDonnell. This is a guy who had this as his Twitter account profile picture for quite some time, and I really don't think anything more needs to be said about that from me. It very much all speaks for itself. But in the wake of mounting international outrage over Israel's genocide of Gaza, all of a sudden we thought, well, maybe some sort of a shift is coming there. Maybe Keir Starmer is finally making an uncustomary and exceedingly rare moral stand as David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, announced that the UK would suspend its negotiations over a trade deal with Israel in response to what they described as Israel's intolerable crimes in Gaza. The announcement was meant to signal a bit of a shift, a long-awaited reckoning by so many people in this country, by a Western power that has done far too little for far too long in light of Israel declaring their intent to take over Gaza, was finally going to do something. And yet 6 days is all it took for that illusion to shatter. The UK's trade envoy to Israel, the aforementioned Ian Austin, was photographed as publicly active in Haifa, discussing trade opportunities with Israeli counterparts. The tweet in question by the UK and Israel Twitter account reading, "Great to welcome Lord Ian Austin to Haifa. In a day full of innovation by the Carmel, the UK trade envoy to Israel, visiting the cutting-edge customs scanning centre Haifa Bayport, the Haifa Nazareth Light Rail project, and the Technion, witnessing UK-Israel cooperation at every stop." Yeah, UK-Israel cooperation at every stop. That should be like a byline for the Starmer government, shouldn't it? Austin himself the next day, though, 1 week as that was after Lammy had said the trade deal had been squashed, tweeted out in response to that UK-Israel tweet saying, "Greetings from Israel. I'm here to meet businesses and officials to promote trade with the UK. Trade with Israel provides many thousands of good jobs in the UK and brings people together in the great multicultural democracy that is Israel." Yeah, you can smell that tweet from here, can't you? It's gone right off. And he then posted a link to a Politics Home puff piece that he'd penned titled, "We'd be fools to sever our trade links with Israel." Bigging up your own jump, basically, aren't you? But it really is a rancid sales pitch that gives the impression that the sun shines out of Israel's genocidal backside. David Lammy's statement that the UK was suspending trade talks with Israel received widespread media attention and was interpreted as a long overdue condemnation of Israel's actions. Yet only 5 days later, Ian Austin, the UK's trade envoy to Israel, was on the ground in Haifa praising UK-Israel trade cooperation. So the conclusion to jump to is a fairly obvious one, I think, isn't it? Because it very much looks like the UK had not paused, let alone severed trade dealings with a state accused of committing war crimes, something Austin figures we should just ignore, though, because the economy. Instead, it seems to have continued business as usual. So the fallout from this, as you can imagine, has been swift, and it has been damning. This is so much more than just another political faux pas. This is being seen widely as abject betrayal of the British people. The Starmer lying again to us over something that has appalled so many of us, that he has taken way too long to address already, and yet it seems even now he would rather lie about doing something than actually doing it, and he's been caught out. Austin, apart from being as despicable as I've already shown, is a former Labour MP for Dudley and one of Jeremy Corbyn's most vocal critics. Austin left the Labour Party in 2019 amidst a flurry of accusations against Corbyn, primarily centred, of course, on all the alleged anti-Semitism, which, of course, by this time was really beginning to bite. Austin went on to become a staunch supporter of Boris Johnson's Conservative government against Corbyn, against his own party, such as his instability, as John McDonnell put it, culminating in his being made a lord by Johnson in 2020, presumably for services rendered, though he sits as an independent, it must be said. Starmer's reappointment of Austin as trade envoy to Israel in January, well into Israel's ongoing campaign in Gaza, as that was, revealed not only a lack of intent on Starmer's part, even at that point, to re-evaluate UK-Israel ties, but a deliberate reinforcement of them through one of Israel's most ardent UK-based defenders. Austin's record of unwavering support for Israel is long and it is loud. He is currently a director at the Jewish Chronicle as well, as it happens. You might be interested to know. A publication often criticised for its appallingly pro-Israel alleged news coverage. Less than 2 weeks before his trip to Haifa, though, Austin wrote in The Telegraph, much like he did in Politics Home, very much a similar sort of article, that said that sanctioning Israel will be self-harming and morally wrong, no less. He painted Israel not as an aggressor, but as a victim of Iranian-backed Hamas terrorism, completely sidestepping the reality of thousands of Palestinian civilians killed and entire neighbourhoods in Gaza obliterated. He sleeps well at night, blaming Hamas for everything, I'm sure. And I have to point out, in light of UK terror laws, to cover myself, I guess, at this point, that Hamas does indeed have questions to answer about October 7th, and that this channel does not support them. But every night since October 7th has been one of genocide in Gaza. That has been the story, and Austin has got no answer for that. The duplicity becomes even more damning when we consider that on the same day Ian Austin was in Israel, on that photograph touting getting his trade deals and all the rest of it, that RAF surveillance flights were continuing from RAF Akrotiri over Gaza, because of course they were going on. The British government, whilst claiming to suspend trade talks, was simultaneously gathering intelligence over the very region it ostensibly condemned Israel for attacking, all while their trade envoy was out there trade envoying. So this contradiction demonstrates that the UK government, under both Labour and the Tory leadership before that, has not only failed to meaningfully challenge Israel's actions, but is actively participating in the infrastructure of surveillance that supports them. They are therefore complicit, and lying over trade just hammers that belief home for more and more people. Moreover, Israel's own reaction to the supposed suspension was also rather telling, I thought. Israeli officials shrugged off the UK's announcement, stating that the trade deal wasn't going anywhere anyway, regardless of what the UK was doing and saying, and suggested that if the UK wanted to harm its own economy by not trading with Israel, then that was its prerogative. Cavalier dismissal not only showed that Israel never took the UK's announcement seriously, but it also suggests that the British government never intended it to be taken seriously in the first place. And indeed there's been commentary around that says suggesting that perhaps the UK attack line on Israel was prearranged. And when it comes to damaging the UK economy by not trading with Israel, well, clearly we are still trading with Israel, thanks to Ian Austin's presence. More than 800 lawyers, including former Supreme Court justices and senior legal academics, have urged the UK government to impose sanctions on Israel now. Their plea rooted in mounting evidence of genocide in Gaza, and yet it's fallen on deaf ears. Well, we sanctioned 3 settlers, didn't we? Surely that's enough for you people. What more do you want? But neither Labour nor the Tories have responded with actions that match the gravity of the situation, and appointments like that of Ian Austin just reinforce that point. Lammy's statement on trade suspensions, now basically proven to be a lie, surely, was meant to placate public opinion and give the illusion of moral action by Labour, who have for too long taken none. But morality without enforcement ends up just being a performance, and in this case deceitful on top of that. But that's what Lammy did, put on a performance, and he's rightly getting rinsed for that along with his boss. Adding to the absurdity, though, we have to mention them too, are the Tories. Their leader, still, for this moment in time, though surely for not much longer, surely it can't last much longer, Kemi Badenoch, has over the weekend claimed that Israel is fighting a proxy war on behalf of the UK in Gaza, and we should still be supporting Israel for that. I mean, they're saying something stupid is just par for the course, but this was jaw-dropping idiocy, implying that Israel's slaughter of Palestinians is somehow a service to British national security. Hamas is Iranian-backed, and Israel is protecting us from them, is the implication, despite neither Iran nor Hamas having ever attacked the UK mainland. She is as sharp as a marble and twice as deadly. No wonder Starmer fears reform more than the Tories these days. But this fanatical level of daftness just pushes the Overton window so far into the realm of extremism that Labour, by comparison, still manages to appear the more sensible, even as they are lying to us through their teeth, apparently. Yet Badenoch's outrageous remarks should not absolve Starmer and Austin of their own duplicity. That one party is more fanatically Zionist than the other does not render the latter more innocent or in any way better. Rather, it reveals a consensus between the two main parties that prioritises Israeli alliances and economic gain over international law and human rights. There is nothing between them, as if we needed reminding. Certainly that is how Austin's puff pieces in Politics Home and the Tory graph should be interpreted too. Economic gain outweighing international law and human rights in his mind too. Ultimately, it seems the British public was clearly lied to. A government that claims to represent values of justice and democracy deliberately misled its own people about its stance on one of the most egregious humanitarian crises of our time. David Lammy's words were not empty, they were weaponised to shield the truth from scrutiny, and it only took 6 days for a wombat like Ian Austin to blow this wide open. Keir Starmer's role in all of this is also inescapable. He reappointed Austin. The buck stops with him, he's the Prime Minister. Knowing his track record, as he did, he'd been the Israeli trade envoy before. He permitted the charade of suspended trade talks, knowing it was untrue. He allowed Lammy to speak on his behalf, knowing that the envoy he empowered was already working to deepen trade ties with the state accused of genocide, or at the very least was already on the plane there. The public deserves better than performative outrage and moral cowardice. They deserve a government that acts with integrity and doesn't lie to them constantly, that listens to legal experts and doesn't ignore them, and human rights advocates as well, and that refutes refuses to prioritise weapons and wealth over innocent lives. The suspension of trade talks with Israel was not a policy, it was a PR stunt. That's all it was a PR stunt. A cynical manoeuvre designed to pacify critics without risking anything of substance, and the stunt fell apart in less than a week. That's the truth, isn't it, Keir Starmer? Until there is genuine political will to hold Israel accountable, these atrocities are going to continue, and the UK's complicity in them will only deepen. Certainly neither Starmer's Labour or Badenoch's Tories will do the right thing. The actions of Ian Austin and Haifa are not an aberration. They're the logical outcome of a government that has chosen the path of profit over principle, of alliance instead of calling out a genocide, which we can now never trust Starmer's lot to ever do, unless we can literally see it happening for ourselves, because his word, as ever, is worthless. Of course, the media are up to their necks in this collusion as well, aren't they? And none more so than the BBC, it would seem, as a gotcha attempt against the aforementioned Green Party leadership contender, Zach Polanski, not just over Israel and Gaza, it must be said, but it was in the mix, backfired hilariously in Laura Kuenssberg's face, as you can see for yourself and get all the details of in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, sort of spreading the word and helping to support the channel at the very same time, which is very much appreciated, holding power to account for ordinary working class people, and I will hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.